Okay, so this is our industry event series where we look inside visual effects and animation as an industry. I have the distinct honor of being the one to introduce today's guest, but also today's host, our very own Catherine Tate, director of the School of Animation and Visual Effects, also head of Studio X, and also many credits of her own with as a compositor and visual effects supervisor at ILM and also Framestore. But today in discussion with Christian Kaestner, VFX supervisor at Framestore. Christian is an Academy alum, now known for his work on dozens of films that you definitely know: The Dark Knight, Gravity, Lincoln, Avatar, just to name a few, as well as award-nominated films for franchises like Harry Potter and James Bond. More recently, you've seen his work such as in Captain Marvel and the BAFTA-winning series, His Dark Materials. His current project is 1899, a major episodic project for Netflix, utilizing Europe's largest LED volume facility. So you might want to ask some questions about that. He leads a team spanning concept art, visualization, virtual production, and visual effects. We'll be collecting your questions for Christian in the chat for the Q&A portion later on. But without further ado, take it away, Catherine.
Good evening and welcome, Christian. It's so nice to have you back at the Academy since you were a student here, and we welcome you, and we're so excited to have you share your journey from school to now and beyond.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you, everyone. And hello, Catherine. I'm
Hi.
the student. I'm back.
Yeah, you make us proud. I guess I'm going to start by just asking you a couple of questions, and then we're going to you're going to show some stuff, some imagery, and talk about your journey even more in depth and get a little more technical about the stuff you're doing. But I want to start about the beginning, like what inspired you to come to the Academy and also get into the visual effects industry?
That's a good question, and it's one that I think it's hard to answer, because I sort of stumbled into the film industry by coincidence, really, because I used to work in graphic design and advertising, and it was actually ILM's commercial department that used to do these really visual effects heavy commercials that inspired me to change my career and sort of adopt to modern technology. When I was working in print, and it was pretty obvious that at the time, at the beginning of 2000, that it was going to not be what it used to be in the long run, and moving images and computer generated images really inspired me. And obviously abroad experience is always a good thing, and my brother eventually, despite me not really wanting to move abroad and study abroad, he convinced me that I should be going abroad. So I'm originally from Hamburg in Germany, and I was looking for a place where I could change my career. So I went to see, colleges and schools, and Schweridian and Norman School of Visual Effects. But I ended up deciding for the Academy of Art University for their, I think at the time, because I already had work experience, it was really important that I had a broad exposure to all the various disciplines that would be relevant for visual effects, because there's production, there's filmmakers, DOPs, there's writing, and I think the curriculum just really convinced me at the time. From there, I went to London and started at Framestore. Well, actually, I worked at the orphanage first, so then. But let me tell you a little bit about how I got to where I am now, and how I, sort of fell into this career path. And it's not something that you can plan for, really, and it's not really something that you can decide, I'm going to be a visual effects supervisor and you're just going to go about do it. I really, as I said, I wanted to come from art direction and go into commercials and do visual effects, cool computer stuff. Decided on the Academy of Art University, and then just by coincidence, by an internship, I ended up getting a spot at the orphanage, which used to be a group of guys, Kevin Bailey and who made their own company, and they had an internship place, and I took it, and I stumbled into the film industry. And from there on, like, it wasn't really my plan, but I just went through the ranks of actually having to step way back in my career, because I already worked as an art director. I had a team, and I was, running a European productions, but I actually started as a roto paint artist at the orphanage, knowing that sort of what I had to do, because I didn't have any experience in the industry. And at Framestore in 2007, I started as a junior compositor and went into compositing supervision, and started doing my first set experiences as well on Avatar. And from there on, actually hired Kyle, who you also know, who also taught at the Academy of Art University. He's a good friend of mine now. I know he always wanted to work on Harry Potter movies, so when I had the opportunity, he was my mentor at the orphanage. I learned so much from him, and then I hired him back to come work with me on the Harry Potter movies. And then he was the one who made me go to Montreal and sort of help build the Montreal office, where I then first was head of 2D, just starting to build the team and the studio. Like when I joined, we were 35 people. Before the pandemic, we were almost close to 800 people. So it was within just a few years, it was growing very, very quickly.
Hey,
and
Christian,
then also,
I just had a quick question for you, because we have both animators and VFX people here. I was wondering if you can just clarify what you mean by 2D.
Oh, 2D. Head of 2D is everything that is in the non 3D computer generated images, not modeling, not lighting, not rigging. So it's compositing, roto paint, and at some point I was also looking after the matte painting department.
So basically, when the images are rendered and then all of the live action, basically that we consider that 2D because it's out of the 3D universe at that point. And also I want to mention the Orphanage was a company that was founded in San Francisco many, many years ago. It does not exist anymore, but a lot of people went on. Of course, there's Steve Mashowitz, who's, if you look him up, he's a genius. And then Kevin Bailey, who went on to found Atomic Fiction, which then got absorbed by, but that was a huge company, and he went on to do that. So the Orphanage was, I can't remember when it closed, but it was several years ago. But most of the people there went on to do great things.
Yeah, actually, Kevin only recently, like, it got absorbed by Method, and now Method is part of us. Like, so Atomic Fiction is part of the Framestore network now. Yeah.
Thanks for letting me interrupt you there for a second.
Julio. Yeah. So as I said, you can't really, I think, really plan a career like this. There's a lot of aspects in your life that will play a big part. Some of them are coincidental, and as I said, due to certain circumstances, for example, I was working at the orphanage. I got the chance to work with Kyle on Grindhouse, the poster that you, or the film that you see, to do the damaged film look on that, because the movie was shot on digital cameras, but they wanted that really gritty film look, and that's actually something that I did with Kyle together. And who knows, like, if I hadn't worked on this team with Kyle and ended up going to London, hiring Kyle back, who then convinced me to go to Montreal, who knows if I would be where I'm at right now.
It's amazing how connected the industry is, and how these relationships will come back, and you'll, it's amazing over the years how you end up interfacing with the same people, even though there's thousands of people in the industry. In some ways it's a very small world, right? And you make connections as you go along.
Absolutely. And you get opportunities, and you take them. So I was a sequence lead on Narnia, and then stumbled into an opportunity straight after, where John Tum, who's a Oscar-nominated visual effects supervisor. I used to work at Framestore. He asked me, like, basically, Avatar came to Framestore and asked, "Can you take on an extra small sequence to deliver by the end of the year?" And I think it was February or March or something like that. So it wasn't a lot of time for us. And we said yes, we needed the work. We took the work, and I was sitting next to John at the time, and him and I had just worked on Narnia together, and he just looked at me, "Do you want to be my comp soup on Avatar stereo show? Don't really know how to do this." And I said yes. And then he said, "Also the shoot is over Easter, and I don't really want to go. Do you want to go?" Again, I said yes. I've never been on a shoot before, and he said, "Yeah, you will do it. It's not a problem." And so here I was. My first shoot attendance with James Cameron, shooting Avatar. And I must say, I think the industry is small, because I still come across people who worked on that show, because it was very innovative and it was groundbreaking, and the people that worked on that were usually quite up on the forefront of technology, and you come across these people all the time, all the same names, like it's a big industry, but as Catherine said, it's at the same time, it's a small industry.
Can I ask you what it was like coming? How did you have the confidence to go in and James Cameron has a legacy, and he also has a reputation, and like, were you nervous about going on that first gig, and how did you get through it? Fake it till you make it, or did you feel like you knew more than you thought you did, or?
No, I think obviously, I guess if you go into a big production for your first time, you will be nervous, but at the same time, I sort of knew what we had to do and what we were doing, and I think what really made me feel confident is when the first day I was on set, Jim walked in. He walked towards me and said, "Hi, you must be Christian." And like, he'd never seen me in his life before, right? But the level of professionalism with, you can say about these experienced filmmakers whatever you want, but they are experienced and successful for a reason, because he does his homework. He has a folder of everyone who's working for him with a picture, and he knows everyone that is in charge of something. And there were certainly scenarios where he was asking me questions, and I was like, is he testing me? Because he surely knows the answer to this. But he was not testing me. He was just collaborative, and
that's
genuinely, yes, he has a reputation for being demanding, but he's demanding because he's demanding to himself. Whenever we made a mistake, it was because he knew it should have been different, because he said, "This number is not the right number. It should be 877 and not 878, because I designed this and that's the wrong number." So you have huge respect. He's a genius.
Yeah. Interesting. And do you think that the innovative part of it and the collaborative, like, you couldn't do that without a team, right? I mean, you have to, sometimes when I've had the situation where I went on set and I didn't feel confident about it, and then I realized that there's so many people that are so brilliant in what they do that it makes it like easier to do your job, because you don't have to worry about a lot of stuff, because the cameraman knows, the DP or woman knows more about visual effects and than other people. And so when you're not just walking into a novice, like, you walk into a situation where if you have a good team, and I'm sure Jim Cameron has the best team on the planet, so that collaboration helps everybody do their job better, right?
Absolutely. And it's the collaboration, but also the fact that you're working with the best of the best in their field. And there's a expectation that you know what you're doing, but also there's especially on set. I think it's even more so on set than it is in the industry. I think within all the departments that we have, but on set you really have that. There's an understanding. If you're a cameraman, you know your camera and you know exactly what you're supposed to do, and everyone has their role, and it's just like an oiled machine. when you have that. And I think it's one of the things that you find to be very impressive once you're on set for the first time, because you know, basically you get there and you think you have to know everything, but actually it's really good that you only know your part really well and you know how it integrates into everyone else. But you don't have to know, like, you have to know about cameras, and you have to know about lenses, and you have to know about film backs, and you have to know your aspect of cameras, but you don't have to, you know how to operate a camera.
Thanks.
And you know, like, visual effects is so much more than just art, and it's also science. Gravity was actually a project that we did, and I worked on with Tim Weber, who actually has a degree in physics. You know, he's a visual effects supervisor with a degree in physics. But that made Gravity so special, because we wanted that show to be so scientifically correct, that all his knowledge about the science and the physics and everything, there was lots of exchange with physicists and scientists about how it should be, what it should be, and then obviously you make a story out of that. Like, well, obviously the filmmakers make a story out of that, but we also sort of bend, you know, the rules slightly towards generating outstanding images, because in theory, on an image like you see here on screen, you wouldn't see the stars, but obviously for a film you need some sort of, you know, orientation of stars and stuff like that. So that's what's super interesting, and it was an eye-opening experience, really, working with Tim on this.
I actually worked with Tim, like, I would say over 20 years ago. I mean, I was just a junior, actually. I was in London, and I didn't know he was a physicist. That's so neat. I mean, I knew he was brilliant, but I didn't realize that he was a scientist. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think visual effects, for what really excites me, is all the time, every project has a new challenge, and every project has something. No matter how much experience you have, usually you tell a new story with a new technology, or an old story with a new technology. You know, like some of the Disney remakes, it's quite challenging because they're brilliant first releases. So to do a Beauty and the Beast in a CG version compared to the hand-drawn version is quite intimidating, I think, because you're working on a masterpiece and you don't really want to mess that up. But there's so many aspects to visual effects where you know, I think, like, if I think back of my school education, like even like elementary school and high school, I think if I had known how I could apply maths in a creative job at the time, and that would have been amazing. I think I would have enjoyed maths much more. A lot of the things that I do right now is you know, it's just maths sometimes.
Isn't that interesting? I agree with you. And, you know, I think that that it's amazing that in this job, no matter how long you're doing it, I mean, I've been doing it for coming up to 30 years. Oh my gosh. You know, there's still so much to learn every day. Like every day there's a new thing to learn, and somebody can teach you something, and that's what's so great, is that vast world of knowledge that you just never runs out.
No. And, you know, like, I've got this extremist effect on, you know, we needed to make this effect sub-skin with, like, you know, so we had to build, like, well, not me personally, but we had to build an anatomically correct model with veins and everything to actually illuminate it with the scattering from the inside. I actually didn't end up working on Iron Man 3 with Chris Townsend, but you know,
I also worked with Chris Townsend at ILM. That's funny. See, it's a small world.
It is a small world, but it's one of those things that I think that's where sort of like the teamwork, collaboration, and you come across the same people again and again, because especially if you work well together, that will come back to you for sure. And so I worked with Andy Kind, who's one of our best creature CG supervisor at the time, who's now also a visual effects supervisor. But we did this look div test with Chris Townsend, and we in the end we got the project of it. But a few years later, I ended up working on Captain Marvel with Chris Townsend, and I think part of the confidence that he had giving us the job was that we had worked with him before, and the collaboration was good. Again, Iron Man 3 was this project was led by Ben Morris at the time, who then went on to do Lincoln. I ended up working on Lincoln with Ben Morris, was Spielberg, and I actually had the chance to then go to on set again with Ben Morris in London for Warhorse for Spielberg, and that was equally exciting, intimidating, but that experience of that team around Spielberg is just incredible. How well that worked, and how well they see the story, and how well they can make bring the story together. It was just incredibly humbling, I think, to see this, and I still see this every day when I'm at work. I come to dailies, and it doesn't always have to be Steven Spielberg or Jim Cameron who bring these ideas, but sometimes it's artists like compositors or modelers, or because I always encourage people to do what you're asked for, but then if you have an idea, or if you think you have a better idea, also present it. Never just present your own idea, because you always should do what you're asked for, but you should always present something that you have in mind, because obviously we hired you, or we work with the people that we think are great at what they do, and sometimes they inspire. Like we inspire each other. They bring an idea which isn't necessarily going to work on its own, but maybe someone else has a different idea. So it's over the time that you build that confidence, really, to just work in a collaboration, in a collaborative world, and explore new worlds all the time.
So would you mind stepping through like what your day looks like, John? I know it changes, but like when you brought in all the assets and you start working on shots, like what would you describe your typical day to look like at Framestore?
A typical day is, I think it's a production catch up. That's checking with the production team, who are you, like with your producers. The line producers are in charge of the schedule, and the coordinators to coordinate all the departments and teams. So we catch up what has happened, because usually you have delivered something to your client, you presented something, you talk through the notes, you make schedule changes because there's, it's Monday morning and there's a new trailer delivery that needs to happen 2 weeks after. You plan for that because it totally messes up what you just had planned the Friday before. We do that every day. And then from there on, usually in the mornings, I personally like to have a little bit of time to just get my head around the project, what needs to happen next, how many shots do we have left to do, how do we achieve what needs to happen, how do we approach certain challenges, and usually the CG Soups comp supervisors or leads have their own sets of dailies. And then throughout the day, we then start having dailies with the various departments, and they present their work, and we discuss how to achieve certain things, because every dailies can bring a new decision, can bring a new sort of methodology, a change of methodology. Sometimes, especially at the beginning of a project, you do a lot of R&D, and you figure out how you do the effect. This is true for explosions or destructions. This is also true for characters like Paddington. I think the R&D for developing a character is just so long before the actual process of filmmaking actually starts, because you develop the character in its characteristics, but also in its look. So the look and its movement has to be reflected in a character, so to bring that alive. And that's actually a really, really exciting part. It's a really exciting part to do this.
I always notice that it's all about the eyes and the lip sync. Like those are the two things I find that are the ones that give away the gag. And like in this still here, like the eyes are just, you feel that they're real eyes, that there's a soul behind them, and that's like really hard to get across with CG.
Yeah, Pablo Guerrero, who's one of our animation directors, who was the animation director on Paddington. It's so funny because I worked with him for so long and I know him really well that I see Paddington, but I also remember when he was developing Paddington with Paul King and Andy Kind for the project. When I watch Paddington, I still see Pablo in there. It's so funny because if you know someone so well, I can still see Pablo in because he's basically, he was Paddington for that time. He needed to be as the animation director. So
wow, that's interesting. And one thing you mentioned that you mentioned confidence and also of course trust with your team. So if I'm a new person, if I'm a student, I just graduated coming in, how do I please you? Like, because part of me thinks I should be really sort of subservient and do my job and do what I'm told. And the other part of me says I need to bring more to the table than, and try to do extra things. So, it's a very delicate balance. And I remember when I started out, I was more of a subservient and I think to the fault of not communicating enough and giving, and trusting myself and the things that I thought would work, that I felt intimidated to speak about. Like, how would you find that balance to gain trust with your producers and your VFX supervisors and your team?
I want to say by knowing what you're doing, which is you need to have that confidence and you need to have the knowledge. Like you can't wing your way in a career like in visual effects, because you really need to know what you're doing. And if you don't know what you're doing for the right reasons, it will show very quickly, I think. And I think that's why I highly, I always thought that the education that I got and the experience that I got through my undergrad as well, like I was lucky enough to have a grumpy old director in the graphic design school who lived for his longest time in Italy, and he thought computers were evil. Mm-hmm. And we weren't allowed to touch computers until the third or fourth semester, only because he said the computer is wrong. Like it's like you have to, like when you type something in a typesetting program, and probably these have now evolved to becoming a little bit better, but the computer doesn't have an eye. It just puts the letters the way they're programmed to be. But you need to develop that eye before you actually use it, because then he said, then you can correct the computer and then you can use the computer as a tool. But until you've learned those basics. So I learned to write calligraphy with ink and pen and brush, and it really trained my eye, because he would, when we were writing something or like graphic design, writing like really neatly with full page, he would always take our piece of paper, hold it upside down, and he'd go like he would never really say it's good or bad, but when you got it right, he would like like very Italian. He would say, see, you get it. For him, that was such a big part. And I, even though digital cameras existed, we had to learn the darkroom with black and white film development. And similarly, that exposure that I had at the Academy of Art University, I was doing a project with someone who was doing production, someone with a DOP. Like I had a team of collaboration even at the university, where I was exposed to such a broad knowledge. And as a compositor, you would think, oh, I don't need to know all of this, but you do. And even philosophy or art history, that will all come back to you, I think, when you start working, especially in a high profile film industry, because you need to have conversations with the filmmakers about why this this works, because or if someone asks you to do a certain style, or something a bit more of this artist or that artist, like it's or like sometimes I would say I was just a bit more like the palette of Jackson Pollock, and if you don't know what they're talking about, obviously you can look it up, but if you're in a conversation, it will become very obvious that you don't know what he's talking about. And
I know the Academy, we require students to take some fine art classes, and I know it's nice to hear your validation of that, because I know a lot of them think, why am I doing this? Like, why am I taking these fine art classes? And it's to train your eye. And why am I, and why are you in dailies and getting 80 takes? Because you're just chipping away at getting it beautiful and perfect, and that just that process alone like trains your eye. We have a Studio X that started after you left, but we're trying to mirror the industry in our program now, and we're pretty proud of what the way it's helped people be more prepared for the job. I know you're going to probably get a lot of questions, so I'm going to ask you about and I'll quickly let you finish, but I just wanted to ask you, right now there was an announcement today that Unity purchased Weta. So a real-time engine company purchased a visual effects studio, film studio. I don't know this is hot off the presses. So I guess, that pretty much is showing the seriousness of how these real-time engines are coming into the film industry and that the games and film industry are starting to get closer together. Do you have any comments, since you've been working on the big stage in Germany, like what your feelings are about this?
Yeah, so I have one of my last slides here is a press picture of 1899. It's shot in Berlin.
Wow.
On Europe's largest LED volume at time. I'm sure there will be another bigger one soon as well. But for me, I think a lot of people ask me, like, what do you think about the virtual production revolution? I don't really think it's a revolution. For me, it's an evolution.
Well said.
Well, because rear projection was around since the since the 1930s. Alfred Hitchcock used it for the birds, and it's a technology that these days with Unreal Engine or Unity Engine game engines, real-time renderers, you were getting into a territory where you can actually generate real-time renders that are good enough to go in camera and combine that with a live tracking system. So for me, the LED wall virtual production world is really just an evolution of the the desire to go to locations that you can't go to I don't know, whatever the reason is. And for 1899, a big reason was that we couldn't travel, and the filmmakers decided, well, let's have a look what we can achieve and how this would fit in. And there were quite a lot of scenes in the script that would lend themselves to this technology, and it's as I said, it's evolutionizing the visual effects industry. I don't think it will take away from the way we do things. I don't think it will take away from it won't steal anybody's job. I think it will.
We'll still have compositors.
We'll still have compositors, and at the same time, you just have to do visual effects up front, right? So you just have to do them before you shoot and not as a post-production, so they become part of the pre-production. But the same disciplines are still required, and it's also not a technology that will replace everything. There's something to be said about taking a helicopter and flying over mountain ranges to shoot and establish those. You can't do that in an LED volume, but if you have a reoccurring scene that especially episodic, I think lends itself for it. I think because you probably have environments that you come back to over 8 episodes, and having the option to have the same weather in episode 1, even 3 months apart when you shoot it, that's really powerful. And the technology, I don't think is anywhere near being done. This will exponentially evolve into what it can do, like LED technology, the color ranges and the brightness levels will increase, and the pitching will get smaller and smaller. You'll have higher resolutions, and soon game engines can do 8K, or because your field of view requires much more than just a 2K image. It requires, the LED wall is 52.5 meters long, 7 meters high, it's 26,000 pixels wide. So you have an image that in the camera frustum you may see anywhere between half a K, or 1K image to 8K image.
Interesting. And I'm gonna ask you one more question. I'm gonna let you finish anything else that you wanted to say, and then we'll open it to questions. But I just wanted to ask you the cliche question at this point of the pandemic, and not how you managed through it, more than like I'm interested in how has it changed things permanently in the industry? Working from home, visual effects artists have always, for the last, let's say, decade or more, had to be very nomadic, and had to go to locations to work. So that might be one thing that you mentioned, but what are your thoughts about the future, and then the future of visual effects based on the pandemic and beyond?
I think we're really lucky that the pandemic came when it came, because the technology was good enough for us to continue to work from home. I think if it had happened 5 or 10 years ago, I think it would have had a much more detrimental impact on the industry, because it wouldn't have been as easy to locate everybody into their homes and still keep the productions running. I think we were lucky that we were able to set up remote working with playback and connections that are feasible to work from home. Also we are able to have connections to your home. I have a fiber connection at home. It allows me to connect to the office, and I can do dailies from here when I have to. It will. I think it's been, in that sense, it's been very challenging for everyone to not be in the same room, not have a whiteboard, and not have a shot wall where you can stick things around. I think that has brought very, very huge challenges to the industry and to the teams. And there's obviously something that being in the same room, being able to overhear conversations where right now there might be conversations happening between a group of people that normally would sit in your production office, and you can't go like, oh, hold on, what are you guys talking about? No, we're not doing that. So you can't like this whole thing, but has obviously changed. But at the same time, I think going forward, it has also enabled a lot of opportunities for artists who, for example, are unable to relocate, or you can obviously now these days you can tap into a specific artist that is in a specific location for some time as a freelancer much more easily, because previously it required getting the material to them, and then they work on it and they send it back to you. Now you can sort of set up in a way. I think that would fundamentally change the way we work. But at the same time, it will still be nomadic, because if the studio wants the Quebec or the California or the London or the New Zealand tax rebate, you still need to do the work in those areas.
Right.
Will that change over time? Who knows? I don't know. Is it going to make the tax incentive go away? I don't think so. But right now, if work is placed in our Quebec office or our London office, the work has to be done there in order to get the tax incentives.
Have you felt that you've had access more to a larger talent pool?
I think for potentially for I think there's a mindset now that it's a bit easier to work with people who are remotely, because everyone's remotely. I think there was sort of like, once you're in your bubble in your office and you always go into office Monday to Friday in you work. I think there's now a mindset like, well, actually, that person is in New Zealand. It's like, I don't care. Like, we'll jump on a call and we'll brief them and we'll talk to them. I think that maybe that mentality has changed a little bit. And I think especially for concept artists or for very specific jobs, that has probably become easier. At the end of the day, I think the future will be somewhere where we are able to hopefully accommodate personal life, family life a little bit more when, like sometimes on the weekends we have to work for 2 hours, like, but you don't have to go into the office and come back, like you still can get some work done, and you don't have to you actually only cut 2 hours out of your day and not in total 4, I think that, and maybe, there will be a hybrid solution for some people can work from remotely for 2 or 3 days, that will, I think, shape itself as we return to the offices soon. But there's something to be said that the personal collaboration you get in the office I don't think is completely replaceable, but I think it's definitely done something to the mindset of everyone that things are possible.
Christian, thank you. Are there any last things you want to share before we open it up to the many questions we have?
Yeah, I had a reel, and I actually wanted to maybe talk more about it as short, but I'll show you a reel of the Captain Marvel breakdown, the work that we did.
Oh, that'd be great.
And then we can maybe have a Q&A after that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, that's just such inspirational work, Christian. It's amazing. And I have to say, you had so much material. I didn't realize you were going to have so much material, and I'm sorry if we're going to have to open it up to questions now. But I think that we just have a lot of people. Are there any last things you want to mention before we open it up to questions?
No, I'm just really keen to answer. Like, when we're here for the students, so let's have some questions, I think.
Okay, so we're going to bring back Will back in, and we're going to bring the Kathleen and Benoit back in to answer questions from, and Will is going to take that over. And Christian, before I'll probably close, but I just want to tell you how inspired and proud I am of all the work you've done, and for you to spend your time here, take time out of your busy day to come and share all this with us. I just appreciate it so much. And
absolutely, Catherine, it's been my pleasure. Obviously, it's it's the school I went to, and I had a very good experience, and I learned a lot, and I learned from the concept of the school. I learned a lot from you. I learned a lot from the people that you put me in touch with. So, you're partially responsible for where I am, I would say.
You were a pretty easy student to have. You were very motivated. So thank you so much for coming in. And now we'll turn it over to Will and to you for questions.
Hi. So there's a lot of questions about internships and jobs, but I'm going to focus a bit on the ones that are about reels. We have some animators who are interested. I'm going to kind of combine these questions about, obviously, and, they have to work on a lot of different things, creatures, people, machines, robots, stylized characters. When they create their reel trying to get a job at Framestore, since they don't know what they'll be working on, what should they include in their reels, and should they put different art styles in?
It really depends on where you want to go. If you want to work in a stylized, obviously, like we've done feature animation, but we're not a feature animation house by nature. Like most of our work is usually based on something that's photorealistic. So stylized work will work maybe for the immersive department or the feature animation department, and for the integrated advertising, that always happens. But I think if you want to work in the film industry on movies, I think you need to portray realism. I think center of gravity and those sort of things, which are just really important, that you can show that you understand the anatomy of a creature and how it should move, and it could be the same for a robot. It could be the same for a car, like if you get the nuances and if you can demonstrate that you understand what is required to go into a final shot. I think as I said, it's a very broad spectrum, and there's no answer that you can say, oh, this one thing you have to put in. I think the one, if I have to narrow it down to one thing, is that you understand your animation in the physics of it. I think that's probably, and obviously alongside that is always storytelling. Like you have to, if you can tell a story and also make it physically accurate, probably won't have a problem getting the job.
I like that, because that's something we tell them too about their demo reels. Like even just with a single shot, if you can tell a story in there, then that goes a long way. We have a number of students here from our School of Games, which is really cool. Do you hire people from the games industry? One somebody wants to know. And is there a big difference? What do you look for in experience?
Again, yes, we do hire for the game industry. Again, in our immersive department, probably more for sort of the real-time immersive technology, if that's what you want to pursue. If you want to sort of jump onto the train of virtual production, real-time rendering, we do hire into the visual effects industry too. It's relatively new, so there's not a lot of, it's not a huge team at the moment. Currently building that. Like our Framestore production services is only 2 years old. But yes, we certainly can use anyone who is talented and has an desire to go into this industry and learn as we build. And if you want to come from the game industry, again, you should probably demonstrate a specific sort of potentially highly specialized aspects, like even at this stage, if it's being able to generate cinematics, for example, that could be very beneficial for us because it's very close to generating visual effects, or a lot of the scripting. I'm not sure what levels these are, but scripting and technology can always be a big entry point.
I'm going to rephrase some of the questions, so sorry to those of you. I hope I'm capturing the spirit of it, but you mentioned just now the real-time and virtual production, and it's just coming up more and more in the industry. But I'm going to rephrase this a little bit from this question. Obviously, people can specifically try to get that job, but is that something that they should try to put that in their reel or get work for that if that's what they specifically want? Or is that something that a lot of them should be putting into their breadth of work anyway?
I think at this stage, I would hope, and I did discuss that with Kaestner already in a previous conversation. I think, you know, as the curriculum, you know, university will evolve, I'm sure games and real-time technology will become part of the 3D animation visual effects department anyway. So as I said, I don't think virtual production will replace the departments or jobs that we have. So if you want to be a compositor, you can still be a compositor. And if you have Unreal or Unity or real-time game experience, that's a bonus, I would say. I think that's great. It will, you know, it will be a thing. It will be part of what we do going forward. So I can only encourage you to learn it. And if you don't, you know, if you don't take classes, you can still learn it on your own time. Like we are basically forced to learn it on our own time on the side, where, you know, like, hey Christian, you're going to go to Berlin and do a real-time project. It's like, well, okay. So, you know, I sit down and do the virtual production curriculum from the, you know, Epic Games tutorials, and I have to get my head around that too. So by all means, it's a bonus. There will be jobs coming up for on the technology side where I think you can apply for now, but they're also very technical. They're very technical and specific to LED walls and how to get and display working on that. So if as a creative job, I think learn it, use it, and you can still, if you're a modeler, you can still present them in Unreal, and it's great if you can, and if you can light them, you know, it's a Unreal Engine is basically a visual effects pipeline, you know, to a certain degree. So if you know that and you know Aspect very well, then it's great.
Actually, speaking of technical, very technical things, we do have a question about Houdini artists. So if we have, you know, a number of specialists who are looking to do particle simulations and things, what's kind of looked for, what's kind of expected for people looking to get those kind of jobs in their reels or when they come out of school?
Again, like I think if you're able to do on your reel, like, and I'm going to be, I think, brutally honest, reels are, you know, like, and I think I know a lot of people put a lot of work into their reels, but you really have to capture us in the first 30 seconds because we usually don't have more time. And like, if you haven't got me by, like, if I'm still staring at your title card after 30 seconds, it's probably too late. I'll probably moved on because we really don't have time. And we, like, sometimes when we have to really recruit, you know, we try to pay attention and find the best that we can. But you know, it's not with a mean heart, but we really have barely any time to do this on the side. So if you can put, you know, I'd much rather see one really, really great shot than 10 mediocre ones. That's, you know, that's my mantra. And obviously, if you've done one really, really good shot, then I would like to see more. But you know, that could be, you know, you know, maybe in total have 2 or 3 or 3 on your reel and not 10. And if you're not convinced that it should be on your reel, don't put it on, because there's no point. If you're not proud of the work that you've done, then don't put it on. And as for the Houdini question, again, it goes similar to the animation in film industry. It will be realistic explosions, realistic destruction, realistic phenomena like realistic ice, realistic sand, realistic rain, realistic something. For sure, for the film industry.
So you put that wow factor right up front with really realistic simulations. Like, that's awesome. There's a lot of questions about reels and jobs, so you know where our students' heads are at. I'm actually going to jump in with a question of my own because it follows up on something you and Catherine were talking about with people being able to, as artists, not just the director or the supervisor, contribute their ideas. But is there a way that junior artists can advocate for themselves in those situations that is both, you know, respectful and professional still? But I think a lot of students, a lot of people coming right out of school, as Catherine alluded to, might be really kind of less likely to communicate? They might be fine communicating in their team, but not necessarily communicate when they feel strongly about their art.
Yeah, it depends. I always found Framestore a very good place to do that, because we encourage the team or the artists to present their work. So not just sit there not say anything, but we always encourage them in dailies to say, okay, what have you done, why have you done it, why have you not done what I asked you to do? But that's always, I think I've always found the atmosphere, especially at Framestore, very collaborative, and we all know that doing the work that we do, I can't do the project by myself. I'm relying on a highly talented team of artists, and that's that's the way it has to be, and it always will be. So I'm in need of their expertise, and everyone who's maybe goes back to what I said to Catherine as well. I think you need to know what you're doing and to understand why you're doing it, because then you can also explain it, and then you can iterate over it, and you can make it better, because I'm sure you will do something and you will look at it again and compare it to the previous version, and you will realize, actually, if I did this, it will be even better. So I think if you can be self-critical, you will have no problem speaking up, and by all means, in a collaborative workplace, which I would say Framestore is very much so, you should always be able to speak up.
So it's partially the company you're at, but also with your knowledge comes more confidence over time. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Actually, there's a few questions about kind of company culture, and we'll stick just with Framestore there, but the questions about benefits, questions about work hours, and the infamous crunch of visual effects, but we'll just distill that into how do you feel about Framestore's company culture for artists, and speak from experience there?
I've been with Framestore for 14 years, and it's a lot of people have come through the ranks within Framestore, and I think a lot of people have come from being a runner and stay at Framestore. For me, when I joined, it was mainly the London office, or only the London office really. It was still quite a small company, but the company had existed already for 20 years at the time, not quite, maybe 15, 17 years or so. But it was quite clear that it is a visual effects company where people care about the images that we output, and we always pay particular attention to what we present, how we present it, and what the quality of the images is. And I always found it that there was so much fun making these images through collaboration that I find Framestore a very pleasant place to work, because even if you're a junior artist, you can come up with something and people will appreciate it and say, this is really, really cool. Thanks for coming up with this. We're going to show this to the client. That doesn't necessarily happen everywhere. I think they in the industry there'll always be egos, and that's normal. It's the visual effects industry is it's not an easy job, I would say, like visual effects supervision, like in all its ranks, but there's a passion about making these images in our world that I really enjoy, and for me it's fun as well. So yes, there's a lot of hours sometimes, but at the same time, we're making films, we're making movies, we're giving people a space to escape reality. What better job can you have?
Since you have made it through many hierarchies of this in the industry, I think this is a really good question, but is there a role that lends itself more, or just in general, is it, I don't know if easier is the right word, but for people who want to become supervisors, would they go the CG route or the VFX route? Are they kind of the same? Is one more difficult than the other?
No, like I would say, like Traditionally, I think when I joined, people would come more through the 2D slash compositing side, just because they would be closer to the finished image. But I think by now we at least maybe not even more than 50% are now coming through the CG supervision. So you come through modeling, lighting, and rigging or something, and then become a CG supervisor, and then from there become visual effects supervisor, especially with projects being more and more demanding on technology. CG supervision is just as much as a career path as 2D, as compositing.
Actually, I have a follow-up on that because the students have asked me before, and I don't know the answer, but is it something that being a generalist would lend itself towards, is to get into a lead or supervisor position, or not necessarily?
Yes, so I think in that sense, I think if you have always been a generalist and want to be a generalist, I think visual effects is probably not the place you want to be, although we have quite a few generalists that have specialized in something, and that is super useful, especially in look dev or any sort of R&D or development work where you have to solve a particular problem. If you have someone who is a lighter but also knows how to model and knows how to rig or something, that can be really, really powerful. We have a department that is called the VizDev department, where it's like it's taking a creative challenge from a client and just put some visuals against it that are outside the visual effects pipeline. Because usually if you put a visual against the visual effects pipeline, it takes a couple of weeks for it to come out the other side. But clients don't have a couple of weeks usually when they want to answer creative questions. So we have a VizDev department that's usually highly talented and highly generalized, because you need to do your own compositing, maybe do your own modeling, do your own rendering, those areas. But again, in integrated advertising, immersive, you probably, if you want to be like where stiff stuff is a bit more fast-paced, generalists are always really welcome. And as I said, we have some really talented artists on the CG side that, in effects or in lighting or in rigging, that have been generalists but have decided to specialize at some point.
This is a question from much earlier, but I think we take for granted some of this information. We should make sure everybody knows this, but they say, out of curiosity, how do studios end up working on movies? Again, like a lot of us assume this, but do directors and producers seek them out, or do studios bid for the project?
As well as, obviously, you start building relationships with clients. And client visual effects supervisors say, oh, I would like to do this project with person X and Y. He's now at this company, so let's send them a bid package. But we still have to bid, and we still have to get the work awarded, and we still have to compete with, it's a regular process, because at the end of the day, above the visual effects supervisor and filmmakers, there's always a studio who wants to make sure that they compare prices, and sometimes we get work awarded that needs to place X amount in Quebec and X amount in London, so that they can spend enough money in each location to get the rebates. But it's a regular bidding process where you have conversations, you build relationships, and you talk about projects, and obviously there's a working relationship. That's great. And if you work together with someone, maybe you work together with someone who's now all of a sudden a client supervisor, and they want to bring back some work to that person that you worked with because they went to another company. So there's never ever burn any bridges in the visual effects industry. You will cross path again, that's for sure.
It's a small world after all. So actually, now that makes me curious. Is there any project that you did that you specifically really sought after or really wanted, or is there a dream project you have that you would love to do?
Don't know. I've always embraced the challenges ahead, and for some reason, they've always found something in a project that made me curious about it. And there's always something super interesting in the work that we do, even if you don't necessarily think that the story is very interesting, but the aspect of the work that we do could still be very interesting, or it's not your kind of movie, or like if you don't like horror movies and you end up working on, like, I never liked horror movies, but I must say working on Grindhouse with Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez was so much fun, because they had so much fun doing it that it transpanded, like, and I didn't know that making horror movies could be so much fun, like it's I personally, I don't have a project that I want to say is my dream project, that if that comes up, then I would love to work on that. I've always found something super interesting in the projects that I do, and most of all, it's I think the collaborative teamwork and the fun that we have making it.
I'm not sure if this is for you or for the recruiters, but it could be applicable either way. But are there differences that you would look for in a demo reel from someone trying to get like a job as a compositor, as opposed to someone going for an internship? Are there different levels of expectations there?
I mean, yes, if you want to be a compositor, you have to have some sort of experience, so that usually would show in a, I don't think as an intern you necessarily have to have and work experience is great, but you're not expected to have like work experience. If you want to be a compositor, you probably want to bring some sort of work experience, at least as a painter or roto artist, with you. So there's different levels. But I've seen demo reels for internships that could have easily been for a job application, and we usually then if it fits the internship and they turn out as good as we thought, they usually stay. Like that's sometimes we should hire this guy straight away, not even worry about an internship, because sometimes people are maybe just want to break and want to get into a foot in the door. And I think internships are a great way to get the foot in the door, because even if you think you should be working as a compositor or as a FX artist or something, I had worked in art direction for some time. I had led a team, whatever. I still started off with an internship at the orphanage, and once you have the foot in the door, it will if you're good at something, things will happen by themselves. I think it's not really a question.
Always put your best work forward. This will be our last question, but it's about like a knowledge gap. And is there anything that you wish people did know more of coming out of school, like when they're being hired or coming into a studio? Or maybe this could apply to you coming out of school, and granted this is now as opposed to then, but is there anything that you see that maybe people should focus a little more on? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a software, but just anything.
No, so and I'm going to say this because I brought it up earlier. What I see happening is because it is not really, maybe not taught as much, but traditional arts, photography, like the mechanical sides of the filmmaking aspects is so important. Yes, we have computers, and yes, we have digital cameras, and we have everything. But if you don't know what it means to expose your film, then you will not know how to grade. Like you will not understand how things work, how RGB channels work. Like if you're not, like, it is so important that you know the foundations, if I may say. I think that's a good way. And
I love that.
Yeah, as I said, in my undergrad, I had to take black and white photography, and one of the exercises was a photographer take a picture of a white egg against a white black background. Just have to, and it's incredible to see by that simple exercise what you can do with light, and shadow, and all of that. And that's if you know the traditional arts, and I can sketch my way around. I'm not someone who can take a pencil and draw a portrait of you. It's not that's not me, but I can sketch. I can get an idea across. I can in my own style, and you need to be able to do that. You need to understand photography. You need to understand art history, philosophy, and all these things that are so important. I think that's like the mechanical things of filmmaking are, knowing how a light works, knowing how, how physics and maths work. I think it's actually super important. And software is like my teachers always used to say, it's just a tool, it's just another brush. If you know how to do a photorealistic effect simulation in Cinema 4D, I'm sure I can teach you Houdini. Doesn't matter. Sometimes it's like, oh, you did that in Cinema 4D, sometimes can be even more impressive. Like having, obviously Houdini is one of the best simulation tools out there, and that's what we use as well. But if you understand the concept of effects and physics, you can't do any, if you want to go in effects simulation, I would actually encourage you to do an intern as a special effects artist and blow stuff up with, if you can, and shoot some stuff at high frame rates and just see how things move and behave.
Yeah, so you heard it here, everybody. You have to be students of the world. Just learn a little of everything and try to gather as much information you can. Thank you so much. I mean, we have so many questions, but I think that's all we have time for today. Catherine, did you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, this has been amazing. And this we'll probably be posting the recording in a week or so. I love these intelligent questions that that our students and others in this event have been asking. And I just appreciate your time and thank you for coming. We're very lucky.
Thank you for having me. I'm sure I'll see you soon again.
Okay, thank you, Christian. Take care.